Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dan Hanford, and my wife, Danae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur. On the podcast with us today is Todd Uterstaedt. And Todd, I want you to get us started by talking to us a little bit about your background as an entrepreneur and where your current focus is as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm a former Army intelligence officer turned VP of a consulting company turned entrepreneur. And now I help other founders on their journey from founder to CEO on our podcast, From Founder to CEO, as well as our coaching business where we work one-on-one with founders.
That's exciting. You know, I haven't actually taken the time to listen to your podcast yet, but it sounds very interesting. It's called From Founder to CEO.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun. It's kind of the anti-entrepreneur hero story that we all read about on, and I know you guys focus on too, because we always hear about all these stories of entrepreneurs doing great big things, but oftentimes we don't hear the kind of the blind spots, limitations, the mistakes. And so when they come on our show, they have to share a very specific story about their journey from founder to CEO. As a matter of fact, a couple months ago, we had Seth Godin on, and a lot of people know Seth Godin. He's a pretty well-known marketer and author. And even he tried to get away with not sharing a very personal story. So I said, I remember Seth, got to share that story. So he did too. So that's kind of what we do in our show. And we've been doing it for 3.5 years now.
Well, speaking of mistakes and sharing stories,
yes,
let's dive into our first tough decision, which I like to call the sore thumb tough decision. It's a tough decision that you've had to make as an entrepreneur that really kind of, when you think about tough decisions, it really sticks out in your mind, but you've learned quite a few lessons through that tough decision. So can you share with us a little bit about that tough decision that you've had to make?
Relatively recent one. So we've been doing this for 3.5 years, and we didn't really go at it with a monetization plan in mind. To be frank with you, we were just doing a show because many founders would call me and say, hey, Todd, help. And we didn't have a mechanism to kind of do it at scale. So when we started the show, we just were listening to founders and tell us what they needed. Last fall, we started hearing that they kind of wanted a membership, but I wasn't quite sure how to go about marketing that or figuring it out. So we decided, well, you know what? The way to get people into a membership is to have some courses. Since, Dan, everyone talks about courses nowadays, right? So the decision that we made was to spend $5,000 on Facebook and a little bit of LinkedIn marketing to see if we can build support for this course. Well, I'm very, very embarrassed to tell you that it was $5,000 down the drain. And I still think $5,000 is a lot of money, Dan, okay? So, after I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, we tried to take a very scientific approach to this. And, with Facebook, you can figure out what photos are working and what messages are working and all that. And in the end, it really was because I went about it in a very marketing way and not about the way I typically do things, which is very organic, invite people in. And I'm kind of embarrassed telling you that because it was a bad decision to spend $5,000 doing that.
Well, don't think of it as a $5,000 loss or a $5,000 mistake. Think about it as you spend $5,000 to realize that that's not going to work. So now you know what's not going to work. So at least you can cross that off your list. But at the same time, it's not one of those things where you look at it and you go, it's not that it didn't work. It's one of those things where you look at it and go, that particular process didn't work, but there's probably some other person that could have taken that same $5,000 that had a little more experience in that and maybe even made it work even better. But so going through that, what would you do, or what do you do now, when you start to make those types of decisions, when you got, some money to spend to be able to market something? Was it the product? Was it the market? Was it the media? What was it that actually didn't work in that process?
Yeah, I think it was a couple different things. One is, I used just 2 individuals, and I should have shared the idea with a larger segment of founders who follow what we're doing and can give us advice. A broader group of feedback probably would have been helpful. Number 2 is I should have just went with what I know. Sometimes when you're a founder, you forget your accumulated experiences, your gut per se, really inform you a lot. And I felt like it wasn't a very authentic way to go about building the membership. And I should have just started sharing it with some people that appreciate what we do, right? And kind of those early adopter type mentalities, rather than cold marketing to people who don't really know, like, and trust me. And I have thousands of people who know, like, and trust me by listening to my show. So it was kind of ignoring the obvious thing that we've got a lot of people who I could tap into rather than trying to do cold marketing.
Did you scrap that course, or did you just kind of change who you were marketing it to?
We scrapped the course. And it'll probably be something inside of our membership community at some point in time because it was quality material, if I do say so myself. But, but at least that's what people tell me. But, you can go about marketing different ways nowadays. There's the AI machine learning, online tech approach, which works for some businesses and models. But then there's also kind of more of the organic, and I've taken more of the organic route. And I think I need to apply that to our membership as well.
So talk to us a little bit about a different type of decision, a decision where, it was difficult to make, but turned out really well. So Talk about one of those types of decisions.
Sure, absolutely. So this is kind of bringing on a co-founder decision. So a number of years ago, we were sponsoring an Ask the Founder, Ask the CEO type of segment in a business publication. And someone saw that, and a colleague of mine said to me, "Hey, Todd, this person called today and they want to talk with you. They saw that you're advertising and what you're doing, and they want to talk about joining the company." Well, I get tons of people who are always knocking on our door, especially other coaches. And so I was like, do we really need to talk to this person? You know how many people have gone through recently? And so my colleague said to me, "Todd, just talk with her." So I did. Well, she ended up being our co-owner, and her name's Amy, and she is just amazing because she has, first of all, she's a social psychologist, and so she sees things differently than I see them, and she's very different than me in many ways. So when it comes to decision making, she really brings a much more robust way of looking at our company problems than I could possibly ever imagined. So the decision to say yes, to have her come on board and buy into our company was a really good decision, although it was really hard when it was happening because she's very different than me.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about, having somebody else buy in or sharing equity in a business. Last night, we were watching an episode of The Profit, and one of the things that Marcus Lemonis was doing was trying to obviously buy into a company, and it was a person that had 100% ownership in this company, and she didn't want to really give up any equity. And so he had ended up going down from his original 33% equity that he wanted and what he was paying for it down to, I think it was like 30% at first. And then I know a week later, she comes back and she's like, "I just can't, get graps with giving up 30%, And so he's like, "All right, well, let's go down to 25%. But I'm going to reduce my equity," or, whatever the case was. And then there was another partner, not really partner, but another employee in the business that had been with her ever since she had started. And he really wanted some equity as well, but she still didn't want to give it up. And so they, had to create some sort of a process in place for him to earn his equity into the business, over the next, 5 years or whatever the case may be. But, I definitely think that sometimes as entrepreneurs, we get caught up in, I want all the equity, but really, I always look at it and I say, you can own 100% of a business that only produces, $100,000 a year profit, or you could own 50% of a company that does $500,000 a year profit. And it's totally different, but if you bring on other equity partners, a lot of times it can transform how you do business.
I so agree. It's either pay me now or pay me later, right? It's either an opportunity costs or real costs. And I think our mantra is always about going from founder to CEO. It's about the team, not the title, because building the team is actually what helps bring things alive. And you two know that.
Share some strategies that you use when you are making a difficult decision. When you're faced with a tough decision, how do you approach that decision, and how do you come to some sort of decision or choice to go forward?
Yeah. So in this particular case, I practice what I preach because I'm a big journaler. And when I say journaler, I mean, I'll grab my bag here, like the moleskin journals, old school, not electronic. So I, once a week, when I'm struggling with decisions and just to clear my head, because I think that's one of the biggest issues when we're trying to make decisions as entrepreneurs, we've got to have a clearer head. So I journal once a week about these 4 questions, and only these 4 questions. What am I feeling grateful about? What am I feeling optimistic about? What am I still worrying about? And what am I feeling discouraged about? And I find when I answer those questions when I'm journaling, all of a sudden, it feels easier to make decisions. It feels easier to move forward because I found a place to put all of those dangling ideas in my head that are running around in my subconscious like a computer program that's slowing down the computer, right? And get those on paper. And then I also find I have my journal and like, you know what? I experienced that 2-3 weeks ago and I was feeling this way, and it's okay because we got through that. So that's my big one. And it's not, it's not something like you would say, well, this is a great model to use or whatnot. It's really just emptying my head.
Can you list those 4 questions again? Because I've heard people talk about journaling and how they journal. And, I write a lot of things down. I wouldn't say that I journal on a regular basis, but I get those same things in my head. I'm like, I just got to get them down so that I don't have to worry about remembering them or thinking about them anymore. But I haven't heard anybody give a framework that's so simple like that. And just to do that on a regular basis, I can see how that's really valuable. So will you give us those 4 questions again?
Yeah, I'm happy to, because I do distinguish it between like the to-do list, because the to-do list is like, okay, yeah, I don't want to forget. I need to do those things. And there's lots of different tools way of doing that. These are not to-do things. These are like, I have to process and think. The first one is, what am I feeling grateful about? The second one is, what am I feeling optimistic about? The third one is, what am I still wondering about? Like, what am I still kind of not sure about? And then what am I feeling discouraged about? And I put that fourth one as the last one because I find that there's probably a lot more of those because as an entrepreneur. And so I want to make sure I kind of start like I do with a coaching session or with our groups. If you start with wins, right, it changes your mental attitude toward the things that you're worrying and discouraged about.
Very good. I love that.
One thing I would suggest, I like the format. I like the 4 questions. I agree. You always want to start with your wins. I would suggest maybe changing that a little bit and putting what you're discouraged about maybe at number 3, because you want to kind of sandwich it in there because you want to also end on a positive note too.
That's true.
Maybe switching up 3 and 4 a little bit to kind of, get the negative out of the way, not necessarily negative, but the discouragements out of the way that you're thinking about, and then go in there about what am I wondering about now? After you've digested all that information, going into what you're wondering about.
I'm going to change it up, see what happens. I'll let you know.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll talk to Todd about some of his favorites as it relates to his life as an entrepreneur.
Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HanfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HanfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HanfordCapital.com. All right, we are back. Todd, I want you to start us off with this series of quick questions and answers that we call the trifecta by starting to tell us about what is your favorite technology that you use in business that helps to make your life easier as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I use Slack in combination with Zoom on a regular basis. And whenever I have a new group form or a new coaching relationship or our team is working on something, we create a new Slack group. And now Slack can integrate with Zoom. So if we need to hop real quick from a Slack conversation into a real live video conversation, it's really push button easy. So I love Slack and Zoom together.
We've had 3 interviews this morning and 3 people tell us Slack. So we don't use Slack yet, but I think we're going to have to check it out.
Oh, I love Slack.
What's a favorite quote that you've heard that's helped you as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, my favorite quote is because I do think it feels this way all the time is I know everyone loves to quote Elon Musk and he has his own troubles and challenges right now. But my favorite quote is being an entrepreneur is like eating glass and staring into the abyss. Because I think that as entrepreneurs, it's like, oh man, not another thing I got to kind of swallow, not another issue. And that's why I love that quote because it's so apropos.
And what's your most favorite book that has helped you make better decisions as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I even got it to show you here. It's called How We Decide by Jonah Lehrer. And it talks a lot about the science of decision-making and new emerging research and about how we can incorporate other thoughts and ways about being able to make a decision. So it's How We Decide by Jonah Lehrer.
What's the next thing for you right now on your vision or dream board?
Yeah, so hopefully this fall 2018, we're going to be launching our membership for founders that focuses specifically in helping them build their teams and build themselves as a leader of that team. We find in our work that there's not a lot of resources for that in a very, in a supportive way without a very, very big price tag. So some of these entrepreneurs that spend $15,000, $20,000 for a 3-day retreat or $60,000 for, a 4-month cohort. It just drives me crazy, and it doesn't have to be that way. So we're hoping to democratize a lot of that development for a lot of founders who are looking for support in a membership format. But it's a lot of work to put all that together. So my hope is in this September, we're going to be launching it.
That's pretty exciting. I really want you to share with us right now. I know you mentioned the podcast earlier, From Founder to CEO. Our listeners can research that. I'm sure it's on iTunes and all the major platforms for wherever you can get your podcast. Wherever you're listening to this one, you can find that one.
That's right.
So I would suggest looking that up, subscribing to it, and listening to his podcast. How else can the listeners reach out to you to start to follow you or ask you some more questions after they finish listening to this episode?
Yeah, my favorite platform is LinkedIn. I just feel so much more comfortable on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter and Facebook too, From Founder to CEO, but LinkedIn is the place I really like to engage, and I share a lot of content on there as well. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or just hit the follow button.
Well, Todd, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today. Look forward to following you and having you on future podcasts as you continue to grow as an entrepreneur.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email, where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.